Hey folks, Alan Manick, the HotRodHippie here. Today's video, we're doing a product review. We're taking a look at the Matco MT2422 Micro Surface Prep Tool. So let's check it out. I don't know why I had to get so animated with micro since it's a small phrase, but this tool is a small surface prep tool, or that's what they're calling it. I'm calling it a grinder. That's what I've been using it for primarily, and that's what I use a tool like this for primarily. So as with any of my product reviews, I'm going to tell you the specifications, I'm going to go ahead and show you it in operation, and then I'm going to tell you what I really think of it. So let's check out the MT2422. So the first thing you're going to notice about this thing is it is legitimately small. When they say it's the micro surface prep tool, they are not kidding. I knew it was going to be small when I ordered it, and when I got it in my hands, I was still surprised with how small it is. The size measurements on this thing from the back of the normal air inlet fitting to the end of the head is 3.55 inches. From the face of the 3-inch standing roll-lock disc adapter that I have on here to the back of the paddle trigger design is 4 inches. Now with the paddle trigger depressed all the way, the tool is only 3 9/16 of an inch deep. That head height is a 0.4 horsepower air motor with a straight line design. That means it does not go through a gear drive mechanism that changes it to a 90-degree turn, so there's no parasitic loss from that gear mechanism. This ranges from 7,000 to 19,000 RPM free speed. It has a built-in regulator you can adjust down pretty easily that goes from that 7,000 to that 19,000 RPM settings. And I was really impressed that they actually tell you a RPM range for the regulator. Nobody ever seems to do that. They rate this thing at 84 decibels sound output. And when I have it cranked all the way down to that 7,000 RPM setting, I do find that to be accurate. When it's cranked all the way up on the power range to the 19,000 RPM setting, then it's more like 91.5 decibels, so a fair bit louder than the stated rating. The tool weighs 1.1 pounds and has an all-metal body design. It has a front exit exhaust up here by the disc, and the shaft drive mechanism is a 1/4-20 thread male adapter. So the tool comes with a 2-inch and a 3-inch roll-lock style, twist-lock style disc adapter setup. Anything you have that would be 1/4-20 threaded female could go onto this thing theoretically. And finally, this thing has a 1-year warranty, and it comes in at an MSRP of $204.95. And that really covers the specifications of the tool. As you can see, I've got it set up with my whip hose like I use on all my tools. You can check out my tip about using whip hoses in a previous video. But now let's go ahead and get to using this thing and check out how it functions. So going ahead and attacking some sheet metal with this tool, grinding on some tacked together welds, on some 16 gauge, this thing grinds smooth and it grinds efficiently. That 0.4 horsepower motor, they say that it's as strong as a 0.5 horsepower motor because it doesn't have to go through a gear mechanism, and honestly, I'm really feeling that when I'm putting it to the metal. So that's all I'm going to show you as far as actually using the tool. As I've said in previous grinder reviews, it's a grinder. I'm not quite sure what I can show you to show you that this thing works. So let's go ahead and cover what I actually think of this tool. Quite honestly, I've been using this thing for a little while. I set aside my snap-on half horsepower die grinder that I usually use for my heavy grinding operations, and I put this thing in place of it. And I have to say, I'm thoroughly impressed. That 0.4 horsepower motor they claim is as strong as a half horsepower motor, I completely agree. I felt no power difference going from my snap-on half horsepower grinder down to this 0.4 horsepower grinder. That straight line design works well. Personally, the kind of palm style design of this thing, having it in the palm of my hand a lot of the time when I'm in open areas, I really like that. I'm a fan of palm style dual action sanders, orbital sanders. I use that style and I prefer that style, and I feel that this kind of flows right into that theory, that operation style. The trigger mechanism is variable and it does function well. I do like the trigger on it. It's not too difficult to depress, it's good in the palm of my hand, it's good pressing it with the tips of my fingers, with my thumb. Any situation I've found so far, it was easy to operate. Now, Matco in their marketing material, they list this thing as being 1.5 inches shorter than the standard style die grinder. And that sounds like a really bold claim, and that's what really hooked me. I'm always looking for a shorter grinder to get into tighter areas when I'm working. Now, I'm not quite sure what they're talking about with that 1.5 inches shorter, because honestly, it's not in the head height. When compared to my Snap-on PT210A, the half horsepower die grinder that I primarily use day to day, this thing is shorter. This comes in at 4 inches tall at the head height from the end of the disc adapter to the back of the throttle, whereas the Snap-on is somewhere around 4¼ inches from the end of the adapter to the back side of the head. So clearly, right off the bat, this thing's 1/4 inch shorter. However, when you depress the trigger on it, you'll get into those tighter spaces because it gets down to about 3 9/16 of an inch. So that is impressive. That's almost 3/4 of an inch shorter in head height than my Snap-on grinder. But that's not 1.5 inches shorter. Now, the other thing to note about that is with the paddle trigger design on here, if you want to operate this thing with your fingers on the back side of the motor, now you need to add your finger width into the overall head height. So clearly, if you have big hands or even normal size hands, you've just exceeded the overall length of the Snap-on head height. That said, the trigger is pretty easy on this thing, and it's fairly new, so it might well break in even more. The reason that I'm saying that is because I often find myself, when I really need to fit into a tighter location, I will actually put my thumb back farther on the trigger, and this is one place where the whip hose comes in a lot of handy. I can kind of grip the tool back just a little bit further, and I can use my thumb to operate the trigger. So the actual head height is still that 3 9/16 tall to get into those tighter spots. Now, I did find that my thumb got a little tired doing that, but for quick little operations where I just have to fit into a tighter location, I can do that with this tool. As I previously noted, the regulator is a little sticky. It's a little hard to adjust when it's all the way down or all the way up, but I just take a little pocket screwdriver if I got a little sticky on me, and I can move it fairly easily that way. It's got this neat kind of hammer tone red finish on it that's already starting to wear from where the trigger actually contacts the body when you go full throttle on this thing, so it's going to wear away fairly quickly as I haven't been using this tool that long yet. Now, when you compare the length of the tool versus the head height of the tool, it is significantly shorter than the half horsepower die grinder that I'm using it and comparing it mainly to. This thing is almost 3 inches shorter than the Snap-on grinder that I swapped out for this one. Overall, I have been thoroughly happy with this tool. I've been using it for heavy grinding operations on 1/4 inch plate on down to sheet metal, and it's taken everything I've thrown at it and laughed at me the whole time. So now let's go ahead and talk about what I don't like about this tool. Has to be something, there's always something. I'm always gonna find you something that isn't the greatest thing about a tool. With this thing, personally, what I don't love about it is I was actually expecting it to be a little shorter in the head. It is impressively small, but not quite as small as I expected. It is shorter than all of my other die grinders, so it will fit in tighter locations, so I'm still happy in that regard. I just hoped for maybe a little bit more. Other thing I don't love about this is that front exit exhaust. Where front exit exhaust becomes a problem for me is, say, inside of a quarter panel. When I'm getting into a tight area, a front exit exhaust is a lot likelier to blow dust into my work area to obscure my vision and blow it back at me. And lastly, and probably the biggest thing that I don't love about this, is the price. $204.95 isn't bad when you compare it to the Snap-on grinder that I've been comparing it to, my PT210A. That thing is $336 on Snap-on's website. Now, the Snap-on is an American-made tool. This is an import tool. And that's where things get a little gray for me. My Sunex half horsepower die grinder that I did the comparison video between the Snap-on, the Sunex, and the Aircat, that thing is a strong die grinder and it costs only $70. This thing is great. I really like it. But is it worth $205? I'm not 100%. It's going to be in my stable of grinders that I use on a regular basis. But can I fully, wholeheartedly recommend it for $205? I don't quite know about that. That's going to have to be up to you whether that slightly smaller head height, the more compact overall package is going to be worth it to you. This does have a sibling. It is a micro sander. I have one of those as well. That comes with a hook and loop adapter, and that's a handy tool as well. But here's where things get a little weird for me. Being an import product from Matco Tools, this is not manufactured by Matco. It is manufactured to Matco specifications by somebody else. That somebody else is Astro Pneumatic, at least as far as I can find, because Astro Pneumatic has that micro sander in their product line. You can get that sander from them. That thing is around $100. That's half the price of the Matco grinder. You cannot get this surface prep tool from them, however. The sander has a 5/16 female thread that accepts your backers for the hook and loop paper. I tried to look into how I could adapt that 5/16 down to a male 1/4 inch, and the only way I could find to do it was to have somebody custom machine an adapter. At that point, things are getting a little convoluted. You're gonna have to have somebody machine that part for you. That's gonna add to expense, and you may end up with a taller tool because they may not machine it down to the smallest, tightest little thing they can. They might have a little bit bigger design to whatever it is they make for you. So in that regard, if you really want this compact micro grinder, I'd say pick this one up, if you're okay with the price. If you're not loving that price, for $70, you could pick up the SX5206, and I really recommend that grinder. And lastly, this thing does fit my hand pretty well. I wear large size gloves. I don't consider my hands to be particularly large, but if you have much larger hands than mine, you're wearing XLs, double XL gloves, like a lot of mechanics are bigger folks, well then this may not fit your hand quite as well, being so micro. Alright folks, that is my review of the Matco Micro Sander, Grinder, Surface Prep Tool, whatever you want to call it. You could use the Scotch-Brite discs on it, you can use the sanding discs like I use it as a grinder. There's a lot of options for this little setup. Go ahead and drop the video a like if you found it informative. Let me know in the comments down below. What do you think? Have you picked up one of these? Have you picked up one of the Astro Pneumatic ones? Or are you gonna stick with your standard regular grinder setup? Or maybe you know some way I can adapt that Astro one to use the Roll-Lock style discs that I've missed. Let me know in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this every week. Thanks for coming around, folks.